Voting. It's loading. Come on, come on, come on. And I need to mute.
Oh, it is muted. So
It
don't
is
worry
muted.
about that. Yep.
All righty, I'm starting webinar now.
All right, thank you, STL TV. We will now call the Legislation and Rules Committee hearing to order. This is Thursday, February 6th, 2025. Aura, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Present.
Alderman Narayan,
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Velasquez,
Present.
Alderman Aldrich,
Present.
Chair Varma,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 present. We have quorum.
All right, Aura, thank you so much. I'll now entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from Tuesday, January 28th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Velasquez,
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich,
Aye.
Chair Varma,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 aye votes.
All right, have we gotten our appointees here? Alderman Velasquez, do we
It
see
looks
them?
like we have 1 of 2. Let me just check. I think Mr. Stokes is an appointee, I believe.
Okay. I have my says Thomas Grady and Gilberto Pinella.
Oh, I guess then I am incorrect. No,
I
so
have
we
Would like to, if they're here, we will be skipping over line item 4 and 5, jump to line item 6 for the sub-district appointees. But if they're not here, we'll start our discussion on line item 4. Do we have any? I don't see.
Yeah, because it wasn't supposed to be Gilberto Pinella and Thomas Grady.
Those are the 2 names on my agenda. Yes.
I just texted Mr. McElmore and I talked to him yesterday and he said they were going to be here, but Gilberto says the link is not working.
I see Mr. Grant. No, that's Grant. I'm
Mr.
looking for Thomas
Grant.
Grady. One moment to see where they are. Did you who's having an issue with the link?
Mr. Pinella, it looks like.
Could you tell him to go back out and try coming back in?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's I prefer not to do it without them here.
Right.
Legally, we can, but it is not my choice to do it that way.
Let me see. I see some other people just came. Someone is over here on an iPhone. I'm not sure who that is.
Give it about another 3 or 4 minutes for this, and if not, we'll start discussion. And we can always pause discussion if they show up and circle back.
Okay.
Okay. So it is what, 107 at 110. We will if they're not here, we'll start discussion.
Okay.
See if I can see now. Yes, I can. All right. Okay.
Did Pinelli, let me see, did he try it again?
We've had contact with Mr. Pinella, but not with Mr. Grady.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, Mr. Grady. Alderwoman Velazquez, you're trying to get in contact with them?
Let me check.
Thank you.
Gilberto is trying to enter. He's having difficulty with the link.
Okay.
And Mr. Malcolm Moore says he's on the phone with Judge Grady right now.
Okay, great. Okay, did Mr. Pinelli try to go to, if he went to the city website and clicked on that link, I can always move him over.
Technology.
Okay, one more minute. Let's see. Hmm.
All right, well, what we can do is we'll jump back to line item 4 to get things going here. And if they come on, we'll, or just let me know when you have them locked in. Okay, we will move to line item 4, board bills for review. Item number 1 is Board Bill 162. Alderman Velazquez, it's all yours. Please fly
All
away.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to just share my screen here. You know how I love presentations.
I do,
so-
but I don't know how to do those, so go ahead.
So basically we made a few updates from the last one. We're not gonna have, I heeded your, Vice Chairman, and we're not gonna have too long of a presentation, but I wanted to just go over through a few highlights of what we changed in the committee substitute that you all should have received yesterday, as well as there's a clean version and a red line version. So yes, the overview, just a nice little refresher. City manager is a professional manager administrator that is hired to oversee the daily operations of a government. They're nonpartisan, non-political, and ideally they are in the business of managing operations ethically, efficiently, and transparently. And as we mentioned last time, but I think it's important for us to have some context, 59% of cities over 100,000 of populations of 100,000 or more have some kind of form of city manager administrator. These are not all the 59%, but as we've had in a few discussions, some of the cities around us that we look to as models of success, like Kansas City, Cincinnati, which are similar in budget size to us, places like Oklahoma City, Dallas, Charlotte, which are doing really well and thriving economically. These places also have city managers, and even Springfield, Missouri, which is one of the fastest growing places in the state of Missouri, also has a city manager. So a few key updates. They're, let's say, moderately to big ones. We had originally had it, even though we've been talking about it as a city manager, in the previous version of the legislation, we had city administrator and office of city administration. We had some further legal review because we thought that there might be a conflict with how state statute is written. And it appears that we don't. So we actually changed it from city administrator to city manager. I think that term better reflects what we're trying to do. and the intention of this office and the scope of this office and city administrator. We just didn't want it to get caught up legally, and it appears that it doesn't. So that was one significant change. So now we're calling it city administrator, and it would be an office of city administrator, or city, I'm sorry, we're calling it a city manager in the bill, and as we've been speaking about it, but now that's how it is defined in the legislation. The other big update is after doing some further reviews and there was some concern. I mean, obviously, the Bureau of Public Service is a huge part of our operations and our government, and it's very complex. We heard from Ms. Milberg in the mayor's office just about how dissolving it would, there were lots of places, if we dissolved it, there were lots of places in the charter that we'd have to change, and there's just some very intricate things that legally as written, the Board of Public Service does, that dissolving it could create some problems legally and also just create a really messy situation. And that's really not what we're trying to do. We're trying to, the goal of this is to modernize the city's government and operations, to streamline the services, and to find a way to do that. And we want it, when we create this office, we want the person to be able to work collaboratively, and we don't want to just, destructively start something new. So I think the best way to do that moving forward is not to dissolve the Board of Public Service. So we are essentially leaving that Article 13 intact. And what we have done is we are assigning the responsibilities and duties to the Office of City Manager. So it does not dissolve, change what the Board of Public Service is. It moves the whole piece of the Board of Public Service under the Office of City Manager, and all the responsibilities. So that takes away, that really resolves a lot of the conflicts that we heard last time with just legally how it was written. We do still have a Department of Public Works in here. I think that in the next iteration, that's something that we'll remove, because I think since we're keeping it intact, it doesn't really make sense to create something that may or may not be of use. I mean, that is, of course, the reason why we're designing it as this is to give the city manager, the office, the ability and authority to sort of reshape and reorganize things. And since we're keeping BPS intact, it seems redundant, but we didn't have a chance to update in this community sub. But the big part is that we are not dissolving BPS, so that sunset timeline does not exist of it dissolving in 2032. That's totally out of the bill. And then more minor is updates to Section 7. And parts of it were correct, and there were just some minor parts that were incorrect that related to the code to the budget director, so we cleaned that up. So those are the big, really the big changes. And then, as you see, this is still kind of what it is today. Again, this does not include what the governor appoints, because it's all very hard to fit on a slide. This would be the updated version with the changes that we made. So you can see that even though the president of public service is not in this box in the Board of Public Service, that position still exists. The Board of Public Service box still exists. And then the same components that we had talked about last time, which are, pretty, I want to say standard, but usually are parts of a city manager, like the budget director, what we call the supply commissioner, procurement, personnel director, are all under the law department, city council, we call it city councilor's office. IT is still all under the city administrator, which I did not change the city manager. That is my bad, but that is city manager there. And then same thing, this is just a list of everything, the positions. And again, we made sure that to point out the president of BPS and Board of Public Service remains intact in this new updated version. And then, again, the implementation timeline, this is not anything that can happen soon. Obviously, we know municipal elections are right around the corner. This is not going on the ballot anytime soon. The fastest it could go on the ballot is August 2026, which is our next citywide election. And then as the bill is currently written, we would establish the office of city manager before the conclusion of the next mayoral term. So that gives, some flexibility. I mean, the mayor could, should it get on the ballot and pass in 2026, they could move it along quickly. They could wait till April, But that's what we have so far. So those are just, I want to go over some of the key updates and the latest committee substitute. So questions?
I will go through the committee. Alderman Cohen, questions or comments of the sponsor?
Thank you. I do have probably more questions than answers at this point in time, but I do want to, thank you, Alderwoman. I think that, some of these changes certainly are a little more palatable. I do have, and last time I, brought up my concerns around BPS. So I do appreciate you incorporating that into the updated board bill here. How do you foresee this role not becoming another kind of similar role to what we have with the Department of Personnel and the Director of Personnel? As we have had, a lot of challenges, not just, this administration, but, every administration I've, worked with as an alder person has had difficulty, working with the Department of Personnel. How does this role not become essentially the new Director of Personnel, where those policies, processes that impact, every city department get kind of essentially given their own fiefdom within city government?
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you right. And I see Jason Grant from ICMA is here today, so he might be able to answer to any follow-up if that's okay. I think so part of it is, I mean, obviously the way our personnel director is structured and our civil service is unique, right? So in this setup, it's still mayoral appointees to the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission would still be the selector of the candidates for the personnel director. And then instead of the mayor selecting the personnel director, it would be the city manager, which is a different change. We've also added essentially that there's a clause where they can be removed for cause, which is different than what we have now. I think that one thing that's unique I think one thing that makes this different is that because everything is so siloed now, the ability to see what of all of our hiring needs and our processes will become more streamlined if they're under sort of one place, which is not how it is now. So, is there going to be a transition period where it's not totally perfectly worked out on day one? Probably. But I think the idea is if you have it streamlined and you're able to see more clearly and have more ability to know what's happening in those departments and the hiring and the personnel needs, along with more direct communication with those departments, I think that will have better outcomes for our city. Does that answer your question?
I guess where I'm a little challenged is that, if your board bill is keeping civil service, which, I think would be, I think most of us are supportive of the civil service, keeping personnel somewhat structured the way it is, except you're changing the manager or the appointing authority to the city manager versus the mayor's office. I don't know how that necessarily structurally changes some of the issues that we still have within the personnel department. I'm trying to wrap my head around the totality of all of the changes that would come as a result of this change. And
I guess,
it's,
could you be more specific about what you're talking about?
I'm not sure what this would change in terms of that dynamic, since the Civil Service Commission would still be in place. The personnel department, as it's currently structured and headed, would essentially still be in place, except for, you're changing that they could be terminated, quote unquote, for cause. And then you're also having the hiring authority, the appointing authority as the city manager versus the mayor. So essentially, most of the dynamic that exists still within that personnel department would still exist underneath this new structure, except you're changing it from being appointed essentially by the mayor, recommended by the Civil Service Commission, appointed by the mayor, to recommended by the Civil Service Commission and appointed by the city administrator. So I'm not sure how that's necessarily going to change some of that dynamic.
I guess I'm confused with that dynamic. Maybe I don't understand what that
Well,
dynamic means.
If I might interject, I believe the overall point of the city manager is about the department heads themselves. We're not talking about individual employees, where the personnel director does that, but to have the street director, the parks director answer to the city manager, hired and fired by the city manager, as opposed to being friends of the whatever administration is in there. We're going strictly on administrative ability and performance, as opposed to, who did I grow up with and who do I know? So when you structure that with someone making 2 to 3 times the salary of the mayor, who is above reproach, is my understanding of this, that they are simply running a business without care nor nary a feeling for why that person is there, other than that they can do the job, not who they are or who they know or where they might have grown up or who they went to school with or where a frat or sorority with. I believe that's the intention of the city manager, is my intent, my understanding.
So I understand what a city manager does. I support a city manager form of government. I would support a UniGov for the St. Louis region, and have been supportive of those efforts in the past. So I know the intent behind what a city manager is or a city administrator is. I'm just curious how this particular board bill is going to address some of the other kind of more systemic concerns that come up when you're administering city government. And one of which, it's not the only one, but one of which, that's been an impediment very regularly has been the personnel office, irrespective of who the personnel director is, generally speaking. So that is the reason for my line of questioning here, Mr. Chair, not I understand what a city manager does.
Can I just pause here? Jason Grant is from ICMA. He's also on this call. I know we haven't sworn him in this time. I don't know if Jason has any other additional answers to that question.
First, we'll have to swear you in for the meeting, Mr. Grant, if you wouldn't mind raising your right hand. You swear the testimony you give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so once again, state your name and where you live, and go ahead.
Yep, I'm Jason Grant with International City County Management Association, and I reside in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. To the question, you're right in that there's no form of government is ever going to create guarantees that anything will be there. What we look at is what are the opportunities. The distinction here that I think becomes important in terms of what is the role and what influence does the board have, the unique difference is the power to be able to actually influence whether or not that city administrator stays with city manager now, stays within that position, right? You actually have a voice over that position. So it's not solely under a mayor that the mayor determines and mayor runs within there. This gives some power to the board to be able to influence. If it's not working the way it needs to work, you now have a voice through the city manager with the mayor to say, this is not working. So if there's issues that arise from a personnel perspective, the city manager has to address that. And if not, the board has a voice in that. And I think that's a difference in terms of what might make it change is the fact that you can influence that directly, again, if you utilize that power.
Okay, thank you very much. Danielle, you want to take any further questions or comments, Alderman Cohen, or?
I'm not exactly sure if that answered my question. I think we're talking very high level here, and I have a very specific question around how this is going to change some of the dynamic with respect to that particular. I mean, I can talk to, any number of departments here. I'm a little less concerned about some of them than I am. Uh, just because the other department heads don't have the same hiring structure, management structure, percentage of the city's budget that funds their departments. That's literally in the city charter currently for the personnel office. So it's a very different department outside of other city departments. And so um, are you changing it so that they're not getting 1% of the city's budget in the charter?
I'm not changing anything about, the only thing I'm changing is the bill changes is the reporting structure and the cause. Other than that, we're not changing anything more with that. I'm open, we haven't had a good chance to talk about this in depth, Alderman, so I'd be happy to, if you got additional feedback to, potentially weave it in. But we haven't adjusted any of those pieces.
Yeah, I mean, and then, I guess the other piece to this as well is, the city councilor and the city charter, the city councilor actually works for all of city government, not just the mayor. And so this would be reporting up through the city administrator, um, through the mayor, which would kind of lead someone to believe that the city councilor, is the city councilor for the mayor versus the board of aldermen. So that's not how it's currently structured in the city charter. In terms of the language in the charter that says the city councilor shall represent the entire city. So, it's been a point of contention through, various administrations and over the years in terms of the role of the city councilor and whether or not they, do work for the president of the board or the, board members themselves. And so just a few of the, I guess, concerns that I would have that we're trying to address through this board bill as well.
That's good feedback. I appreciate that. And I'd be happy to, if there's some other, some language suggestions and tweaks, as we've talked to, we've looked to other cities and we know that Kansas City isn't exactly structured like us, obviously, and Cincinnati isn't exactly structured like us. And I think we also know that there might be some things that aren't, I think obviously this might be a moment for us to think about different ways to operate the government. And certainly, if there are other pieces that we need to address to make it better fit, I'm open to making those, talking about that and considering those changes.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, I'm supportive of, city manager form of government. I like this in concept. Would like to have some more discussion around what that means, look like, how it's going to be implemented, operationalized, etc. But I do appreciate you kind of looking further into the, BPS component to this. And, I think one of the challenges that I have with those things is, I mean, we just went through the reduction of the Board of Aldermen, 2 years ago. One of the impacts that had was also on ward capital, and we had to have follow-up legislation with respect to how ward capital would be distributed. Various projects that might have been in the pipeline have now been delayed or altogether scrapped because of, some of those changes. And so, just kind of trying to avoid those types of situations, with a pretty significant change like this. In my estimation, this would be even bigger than the reduction of the Board of Aldermen in terms of the impact that it would have and the, changes that it would take. And, my fear is that, city government, we don't have change management or project managers to help navigate these types of kind of seismic changes in our city government. And oftentimes it falls on, staff in the president's office or staff in the mayor's office. to kind of direct some of those changes, oftentimes through folks that are in, more policy related roles versus, project or change management type of roles. And so, just something, if we're going to go through this type of transition, it would be nice to have even something like that in the language itself so that we have, kind of a transitional department that would help manage the change as we're kind of shifting gears. But I wish we would have done something like that when we did the reduction of the Board of Aldermen, just so that there was kind of a framework that was legally precipitated that basically forced people to the table, because with the reduction, there was no language of that nature in the bill. And so, the president at the time, was actually fighting the reduction more so than trying to, work through it. So, that's another kind of consideration that we need to make with these types of things. We don't know who is going to be mayor or president of the board or an alderperson by the time this goes into effect. And so, we want to make sure that we have those types of things thought through so that when this passes, if it passes, by the voters as well, that, we have some sort of process in place that would help with that transition to the new form of government.
Oh, and thank you for that perspective. And I just want to see if Jason, because I know Jason was a part of, I know Baltimore's different and it's a city administrator, but I know that Jason was, or Mr. Grant was around and worked closely with Baltimore when they made some of those changes, and you've been around their city. So I don't know, Jason, if you have any perspective on, Mr. Grant, if you have any perspective on what Alderman Cohen just spoke to.
Yes, the Alderman's correct. It's more effective when there is a structure around an intentionality to how do we move this forward. That's usually implemented once the citizens, the voters, have voted in favor of it. I know also, like in Portland, when they did their transition, they had some right after the vote, and then it took a year to be able to figure out how do we get that in. And you have a lot of time in that timeline that you gave. If they vote in 2026 and it comes about in 2029, it would be imperative upon the community to say, okay, we know this is coming, setting that sort of structure up to how do we guide this? What does it look like? What is this transition? That helps staff as well as the community and the elected officials kind of understand what is our role now in this change. So I think it absolutely is important work to do. Generally, it's done once they know that they're going that way, because it is a lot of work. So they usually frame that, if it gets voted in favor, they usually stand up that type of a committee structure and then do a lot of work. And it usually is about a year-long process to lay all that out.
Mr. Grant, that sounds amazing. It sounds great that Baltimore and, I can't recall the other city that you mentioned.
Portland, Oregon.
Portland had a city manager, mayor, council that was willing to work through that. Just for some context, the voters passed the reduction of the Board of Aldermen. I want to say back in 2012, we were a body of 28. The voters passed the reform to reduce the size of the board to 14 back in, I believe it was 2012, not to go into effect until after the following census, which would have been 2020, and then subsequently the census is 2020, the data gets released 2021, so the next election would have been 2021 after redistricting had been completed. So there was almost a 10-year span for city government, the Board of Aldermen, to be prepared for those changes. I guess my concern that I'm trying to call out is if you have an active office holder who is not willing to support the change that the voters put into place and not participate in that process, which has happened here in the city of St. Louis, because that's literally what happened, during that time, that almost 10 years, nothing happened until we got a new president of the board. And so, and the few mayors that we've had during that time, didn't really intervene, because that's really, not their department, and they're not going to step on the toes of the legislative branch of government. And so I guess my question for you is, In either of those scenarios, in Baltimore or Portland or any other that you're familiar with, was there language in the enabling legislation that was sent out to the voters to establish an office of transition instead of relying upon, the elected office holders at that time who could be opposed to the change and intentionally either drag their feet or, kind of, uh, for lack of a better term, pervert processes to ensure its demise. Um, have there been examples of that in the past?
It was not in either of those. I'd have to look to see if that's been done anywhere else. I've not seen that as the norm. Generally, because the voters vote on that, and because a city administrator, a city manager, so city administrator in Baltimore, city manager here, it has the power of the council, the Board of Aldermen in this case, have power over that. And so the council in Baltimore made certain, because they have an advised consent, much like you're looking at here. So they understood what that was. The mayor who ran was the one who introduced it in Baltimore. So again, had a desire and a want to do that. In Portland, Oregon, they went their structure of government. There was some pushback within some of the elected, but the power that the people knew what wasn't working, and they understood that. So it's usually that legislative body, because they now have power to establish a committee, to establish a structure, to establish an office, to make sure we do this transition. They utilize that power. And so you as a Board of Aldermen have some power to be able to stand that up. But as it relates to the citizens, it's usually as voters, what is this form of government? How does this work? How does it operate? That's really what they're voting on. The more it starts to get into all the different apparatus, sometimes that'll confuse or conflate a referendum in particular. So the way I've seen it is it's usually if they vote in favor of a transition, usually that legislative arm will step up and say, we want to make sure this transition works and how it operates, and they create an apparatus to make sure that happens. That's how I've seen it.
I appreciate that greatly. I just, having been around for, the last 15 years, I know that there were a number of attempts after Prop R passed for the reduction of the Board of Aldermen. I can think of two offhand earlier in the process, right after that 2012 referendum happened, to establish, committees or to establish an ordinance that would allow for kind of the process to continue in terms of the organization of the board and preparation for the reduction. And none of them made it out of committee, because not only was the president's office opposed to the reduction of the Board of Aldermen, but some of the colleagues at the board were also opposed to the reduction of the Board of Aldermen. And so that just did not happen. So it's a little challenging for me to support something if we're not going to have a process established to ensure that the voices of the voters are followed through and that we have a successful transition to this new form of government. So, and with that, I yield my time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I thank you. If I can at this time, Alderman Vasquez, I see that Mr. Grady and Pinella are both with us. And not to have them suffer through the rest of our day, I thank you for joining us. We will pause our deliberations on line item 4, 162. We will come back to it shortly, and we'll move on to line item 6, the Missouri History Museum Subdistrict appointees. And I believe, Alderwoman, you're still up because these are you're handling this also, correct?
Yes, and I think it's similar to what we do with the other nominees. I would just like to hear from both nominees. We've seen your resumes, why they would like to be reappointed, what they hope to bring to the History Museum Board, and what they hope to accomplish. And then, of course, obviously, Mr. Chair, if committee members have questions.
Okay, certainly. What we'll do is, Mr. Grady, Ms. Pinella, if you will, both we do this at once, both raise your right hand. And repeat after me. Mr. Grady, please unmute. And somebody's got some pink noise going on. All right, there we go. Mr. Grady and Pinella, if you would, the testimony you're going to give us will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Aye.
Yes, I do.
With that, we will go alphabetically by height. Mr. Grady, you're first. Let's tell us your name, what ward you live in, and a little more what you would like to see or what you'd like to do. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm in your ward, Alderman Vollmer, and I live on Little Gurney Court off of Kings Highway in Magnolia.
I used to cut grass up there.
Will you come back? My family has lived in St. Louis since the 1840s. We've always lived in the city limits. I'm considered by some people to be one of the city's historians. I'm the longest serving member of the subdistrict. I was present during the troubles that took place when they went to a different model and a new contract. The subdistrict is a unique operation because it does not really own the collections of the History Museum. It becomes a little complicated, and I don't want to bore you with all this, but the members of the commission need to understand, and I'm always available and always have been to explain to any new members how this contract works, because it was redone with the assistance of Senator Danforth some years ago. And we got a new director for the museum, and it's been moving ahead with brilliance. It is absolutely one of the gold standard partners in the Zoo Museum District now. At one time, we had problems, but we've overcome those problems tremendously. There's no longer a stiff, rigid atmosphere in the meetings of the commission, and the commission is no longer held hostage to various interests that wanted to be able to control the commission. So I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have, and here I am.
All right, thank you very much, sir. What we'll do is we'll go through the committee. Alderman Cone, any questions or comments of Mr. Grady?
None at this time. Thank you.
All right, Alderman Ryan.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard is now with us. So we'll go to Alderman Aldridge. Any questions or comments?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Alderman Velazquez, I'm hoping you don't have. These are your guests here.
No questions, thank you.
All right, no. And Mr. Grady, so you have you been serving on this board for some time now?
Oh, yes. I was appointed by Freeman Bosley.
All right, Junior. Yes.
Yes, Junior. I'm sorry.
No worries.
His father was a nice friend of mine, too.
Good friend of mine also. All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve Mr. Grady as an appointee to the Missouri History Museum Subdistrict.
So moved.
Second.
No previous role.
Previous row.
Hearing no objection, previous role, Mr. Grady, you are passed out of this committee and we'll move to the full board for approval to be on the Missouri History Museum Subdistrict. Thank you very much, sir. You're welcome to go back to your regular point of duties today.
Thanks so much.
All right. All right. Mr. Pinella, you are up. You're sworn in. Give us, for the record, state your name, where you live, what ward, and what you'd like to say.
First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today, Chairman Vollmer and Vice Chair Velazquez, Alderwoman Velazquez. My name is Gilberto Pinella. I live in Ward 6 in Alderwoman Velazquez ward, and I have been a subcommissioner for the Missouri Historical Society since 2019. I believe, or maybe soon. No, 2019. While I have been a commissioner for the Missouri Historical Society, I have been very instrumental in making sure that the inclusion of our foreign-born community, the voices are at the table, not only through guardianship of the fiscal responsibility that we have in the commission, but also to make sure that if there's an event, there is an exhibit, there is an opportunity for inclusion of other communities, or communities that have been here in Missouri, because the Missouri, the Historical Society is so important. I have made sure that I'm the steward, the voice at the table, the advocate, and to make sure that that inclusion happens. So I am delighted to be back, continuing the work, whether it is in the Latinx committee, the events and education committee, the LGBTQ committee, or the Soldiers Memorial Committee. I am very excited to be again a sub-commissioner for the sub-district if that is approved today, and then going to the general.
All right. Thank you very much. What we'll do is run through the committee as you just saw Mr. Grady, see if anyone has any questions or comments for you, sir. And we'll go start again with Alderman Cone.
No questions. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, sir. Alderman Ryan.
No questions, thank you.
All right. And Alderman Aldridge.
No question.
Thank you, sir. And again, Alderman Velazquez, I'm guessing you're fine with this. Oh, you have a question? No.
Cool question. Mr. Pinella, can you just talk about, you mentioned a lot of different groups and inclusion. Can you just talk a little bit about your vision of collaboration and how you bring that to the History Museum in your role? And
Yeah,
how you'll
so
do that?
I work with a lot of different groups, obviously now with the Office of New Americans as well, but whether it's a Hispanic group or an Afghan chamber and so forth, I'm always working to make sure that if it's Dia de los Muertos or the Puerto Rican Society wanting to celebrate Dia de los Reyes, or any other community involvement, I bring that to the table. During the LGBTQ, the Gateway to Pride, the creation of that exhibit, I made sure that OLA, which is the Homosexuales Latinos, were included in the exhibition. So that's how I collaborate with the museum, and also making sure that the community, our foreign-born community, is included in everything that they do. And it's taken into consideration. Right now, I'm working at the Soldiers Memorial with a 100-year-old Hispanic veteran from the United States Air Force, who we're getting ready to do a video and put him as part of what the Soldiers Memorial offers to the community. We haven't had a Latino represented at the Soldiers Memorial, so that is the kind of work that I do in collaboration with all the groups and with the museum.
Great, thank you. Well, I hope to see continuing collaboration from you in the future. That I have no other
yes.
question, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Pinella, thank you very, very much for your time. Enjoy you all the times we see you everywhere. You're quite the celebrity. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve Mr. Pinella to the Missouri History Museum Subdistrict.
So moved.
Second, previous row.
Right.
Need to
With
see your
that,
face, Mr. Aldrich.
Mr. Alger.
Previous row.
Okay. All right. Hearing no objection to previous role, Ms. Pinella, you are now going to the full board. All right. Thank you very much for your time. You can clock out. We got a lot of talking going on here. Go relax. Thank you, sir. All right. With that out of the way, we will then move back to discussion. Line item 4, Board Bill 162. We'll go to Alderman Ryan. Any questions or comments of the presentation by Alderman Velazquez?
Thank you, Chairman Vollmer. So yeah, I do have a few questions. So under this new model, the Director of Personnel would be able to be terminated for cause?
Yes,
Okay.
for good cause.
Sure.
Not because.
Right.
But yeah, so they're not an at-will employee, but they
Right.
But it would not be the current malfeasance on the job.
Right. We took out the malfeasance language and put it for good cause. So it's a little bit different, but of course it's still, we changed that portion, but we didn't change the whole, to change the whole structure of civil service, that would just be another whole thing that would be very complicated. So
Sure.
we changed some things around that we thought that we could within the parameters of this. But, you know, it's still an unusual structure, obviously, for
Sure.
fitting with
And
St. Louis, obviously.
so the budget authority, that would still rest with the mayor then, correct?
Budget authority for the personnel department?
For the city's budget and how much
So
the
it doesn't mess with ENA. It doesn't touch ENA. Well, let me take that back. It doesn't touch what ENA does. The budget director, as it is currently written in the charter, reports and is appointed by, approved by ENA. So the budget director is three bosses right now. ENA. What we did do is we did move the budget director to report hired and reports to the city manager, but the budget director still has, I mean, they still have to do all the things that the current budget director does for ENA. So, I mean, you know, it's not a compromise, and we took, because in most cities, the budget director reports to the city manager. Here, that position is appointed, reports to ENA. And it would still, the budget director would still do all the same functions that the budget director does, which is still essentially reporting to ENA to do all the things, you know what I'm saying? But the hiring would report to the city manager, and also the city manager would have not technical greater budget authority, but the city manager is in a lot of ways responsible for helping create this budget and again, and kind of the things that Alderman Shane talked about. I mean, the budget touches so many departments, right? So I mean, it's again sort of streamlining all these pieces in one, not bucket, but in one area. So it doesn't, in some ways, we move the budget director to report to the city manager, but the responsibilities for what the budget director, you know, the budget director's responsibilities are still to ENA, because, you know, we didn't really change anything relating to ENA except for that piece.
Okay, and so just asking this, and this is kind of a hypothetical because, you know, as Alderman Cohn noted, you know, there was a lot of resistance that we saw basically the entire time regarding ward reduction, all the way up until the very end there. There was, you know, attempts to kind of put that back on the ballot, to undo it, so on and so forth. But we did see it got done, and you know, one of the things that happened there is there was just 14 less jobs. But if here we're adding something on, if the mayor, when this came to pass, just chose not to hire a city manager, what is there? Is this something that has to be hired?
It does. So we have it in the bill that it has to have, they have to start the process, the national search process at least 6 months before the date. And that department has to be, that office has to be set up by April 10th. So
Is there any recourse if the then mayor just said, I don't really want a city manager and I'm not doing this?
I believe there is, and now you're going to ask me a question that I haven't thought about, and I've looked in the bill. There is some recourse, I believe.
This is part of the charter, so that's her Bible, or their Bible, his Bible, whoever the mayor is.
Sure. And no, I'm just trying to figure out if it's you know, okay, ENA can act independent of the mayor, the Board of Aldermen can act independent of the mayor, or vice versa. You know, if there's a fail safe in there. The same way that we had for the removal type aspect.
I'm just looking through the bill right now. I know that all right, let me actually just look instead of thinking about it. We did say that they had to start a date, and right, it is in the charter. So it does say, well, we have a vacancy in the temporary absence in the event of a resignation, termination, death, or permanent disability of the city manager, the mayor shall nominate a qualified individual to serve as an interim city manager, subject to the approval of the board. And within 30 days, the Board of Aldermen's approval of a city manager, of interim city manager shall have initiated a search. So that's in the case of if there's a vacancy, which would, that's not necessarily saying, you're asking what happens if they don't stand it up?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. I'm gonna have to get back to you because
And I don't know is a completely acceptable response to me.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to look at, I know that we definitely put in that they would have to start the national search no later than 6 months before, to try and think through some of those pieces. Because, we don't want them to get to the point where we said that, that they didn't have to do it, but it is, I mean, I guess it is in the charter. So I don't know if it would punt back to, the process for a vacancy. So, but
We can dig
I-
into that. I'd just be curious to see kind of what the process was there. I mean, I think it's unlikely we would run into it, but I've been surprised by some of the things we've run into in this town.
and we do have still on that there's not supposed to be, they're not the candidate, it's a national search. They should not have held office for the past 5 years. That's also included in there. And then, whoever, I know these are not the things you're asking, I'm just gonna say it anyway. They have to have a simple, I know nothing is simple at the board, but a simple majority of board approval too. So, but that is, we don't have if the mayor refuses to follow the law that is passed clause.
Well, that's violation of the charter, and I believe there are remedies if a mayor violates the charter in general. There are remedies for that, so I believe that will be under that. Not to interrupt, I apologize, but
Oh no,
I'm getting old and I'm still the chairman.
I appreciate it, and it's absolutely your discretion. Then I do share also some of the concerns that Shane brought forward regarding where the city councilor fits in on this kind of depth chart. Just that's been such a bone of contention over and over. Does the city councilor work for, because kind of the charter says something different than what happens in practice, it seems. So and I want to make sure that we don't do anything that's going to further politicize that position. I think that the city councilor's office does need to be seen as an entity that's looking out for the city, not just the legal arm of the mayor or the city manager, or any particular one entity. So I think that's something that we should certainly look to address as well. And then another concern that I have is where privatization may fit into this. Would the city manager have the ability to contract or not under this with private entities?
So that's a great question. I think, so one, I don't think it would change. We have nothing so kind of back to the BPS conversation when we're moving everything over. I mean, I don't foresee what we have in place currently, since some of the pieces are moving under it. I mean, that's not changing, sort of the structure's changing. So I don't know, just because we established this new position, if there's nothing in this bill that like negates what we currently do with other contracts, right? But that's something I can look into a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, just because one of the things that we've discussed, I know a lot over the last few years with the inability of the director of personnel to hire on and maintain a vibrant city workforce is the limits of where some of our city departments are, and people have very, very strong feelings on whether we should look to private contractors or not. And I'm not going to open that can of worms in this hearing, but I think it would be something that I would like to at least have a better understanding on which way that was leaning. That being said, I think we made a lot of big structural changes lately, and I'm kind of hesitant to move quickly and make more until the dust kind of settles here. Especially when this goes kind of the opposite of what I've been hearing from people just in general with what they want out of the government. This costs a lot, and it's really top heavy. We could hire on 30 refuse guys, or we could have this person that say, hey, we're not doing a good job picking up the trash. I mean, everyone knows we need more people to pick up the trash. And so for the same cost, we have that. I mean, I also think we've seen in parts of North County, this class of individuals that has kind of shuffled around from municipality to municipality, and you end up just paying them essentially to go away. And they don't lose elections. They have contracts. It removes a layer of democracy and adds a layer of bureaucracy. And ultimately, I think it's well intentioned, but I think we're pointing the cannon at the wrong direction here. I think what we need to be doing is taking a really good hard look at the role of the director of personnel and what they need to be doing, and what they're potentially not doing right now. Because all of this comes down to me, is just an inability to hire on enough city workers to get the job done. And we all know what the equation is there. It's that we're not paying them enough. We have a pay disparity study. We stuck it on a shelf and didn't address it. And so we figured we'd do another one. And my guess is we're going to do the exact same thing with that. But in the meantime, we're going to pay someone, or, look to pay someone, twice what the mayor makes to do the mayor's job. And we're still going to continue to pay the mayor. And I'm not talking about this mayor. I'm talking about a future mayor, Mayor X, and I think we're just pointing the cannon in the wrong direction here. I would have loved to see the charter commission come out with recommendations on the director of personnel. I was pretty open about that, and I'd like to take a much smaller bite at the apple with what I think we can all agree is a real problem, rather than swinging for the fences here with this and changing the entire structure of our government again for the second time in as many years. But I do appreciate the work on this, and it's if nothing else, it's an interesting thought experiment. But right now, I just can't get behind it. But I do appreciate it. Thank you, Alderwoman.
Sure. I would say, I just want to say that in the veins of interesting thought experiments, I would actually push back. I know we have a disagreement on this. There was a great article in the Kansas City Star about all the things that their city manager did to prepare for the ice and snowstorm. And one thing that he did, coming from Jersey City, New Jersey, having surveyed their residents about what was needed, and on the surveys that came up multiple years that they had a deficiency in snow removal, is they cross-train their refuse drivers and their streets drivers. They have multiple kinds of plows, systems things. And I think this is where you and I have a philosophical disagreement on, that I do believe we need to hire more people and we need to raise salaries. But I also think that there needs to be some strategic sort of systems change. And I think that some kind of, I think that is one of the benefits of what somebody in this position can do, that without having people trained and to think strategically, and with that kind of knowledge that we won't get if we just hire more people.
And I don't disagree with you there, and Alderman Volmer maybe or Alderman Cohn may be able to weigh in on this because they were there and I was not. But my understanding is under the Slay administration during storms, basically, if there was a city truck, it had a plow, and so this isn't rocket science. We're not sending a man to the moon here. If we're talking about clearing snow, you got a truck, put a plow on it.
Yep, no, there's, and to maybe get into all of this, what you're looking at is the people who were running the departments back then, or people who are capable of running departments. What you're running into, and what I believe this layer of what you might call bureaucracy, I call it administrative capability, allows for someone to appoint people who actually know how to do the jobs. As we saw the great failure with what occurred with our current street director, admitting that they had not been out on the streets and then start blaming their employees. That's this is where you take the mayor out of appointing these people. You put someone who's going to be there. I believe the city administrator from Crestwood said he was on his 4th mayor. So there's a continuity of service being delivered to our citizens, no matter who the mayor is. This allows a mayor to campaign to be a politician. That's basically what they are, what we are. As an alderman, I would love to have a city administrator. So I know that when I wake up in the morning, that there's somebody who's actually doing a job and not worrying about getting reelected. He's just there to taking an oath of, he's getting a salary. He's working. This is all he's trained to do. He doesn't have to worry about getting a vote. And that, I believe, is the whole purpose of this, where I see when we first started talking about this, looking at the cities that do work, that have these city managers, because we can all agree what we have right now isn't working very well. Some of the biggest stories in the past 6 months have all been mayoral appointees. And I know the intent of this was not for the current administration, but they've certainly handed you some great fodder to push this along, because the 3 big news stories were appointees by the mayor and failure to perform, or she's actually trying to fire them currently because of failure to perform, or they just are still in office. So I think that kind of answers to me, in my mind, where this should be going. Again, we're not talking about now or then. This is 2029 and moving forward. I'm leaving this wonderful, esteemed public life in a few months. I've been there 22 years. I've seen when what we have has worked. And that depends on the administration and the executive branch, because everything stops at room 200. This stops it from stopping room 200. This stops at whatever room that we're going to put this guy in. And he's going to be answering the buck. So to me, I hope that might maybe shed some light. You ask if one of us old guys would shed some light on it. Yeah, as street directors in the old days, the mayors, they were out standing in front of a pile of salt, helping them load the salt. They weren't sitting at home watching Friends or Deal or No Deal Island, waiting for a report from their people out in the snow. So I apologize for interrupting once again. Danielle, Alderman Velasquez, please proceed.
I have no further comments. Thank you, Alderman Narayan.
All right, with that, Alderman Narayan, if you're through, we will move on to. All right, thank you very much, sir. Alderman Aldridge, any questions or comments of the sponsor?
I gotta bring my mind back. What a interesting history lesson from the alderman from the 5th Ward. No, I mean, I want to share some concerns from, I think, some of my colleagues. Mainly my concern is conceptually, I think, the city manager is a good idea. We see where other cities have city managers that are independent from whatever administration is in office, to really just solely focus on city services throughout the city. So I do think that's a plus. I've been able to talk with the alderwoman. I think this committee sub has a lot of substantive changes that makes the bill better than what she originally started with. I do think, one of the concerns that the alderman from the 4th Ward brought up is, just timing wise. And, I've shared these concerns with the alderwoman. We've made a lot of huge changes to city government. We made a lot of changes to our election cycle. We just passed several charter changes, which, it's good to see that the Prop V1 that Alderman Velasquez is working on, we'll see legislation come this Friday to start addressing fines and vacancies. Transportation is still kind of up in the air. But I just think you know, when making such a dramatic change like this, as we know with the reduction of wards, I know there was a lot of time, but that also took a lot of education for residents to know how that's going to work and maybe how city government's going to work. I will, you know, be in support of it today. I would just be hesitant to. I think there's still a lot of education, and that's why I'll support it today. So some of my other colleagues, if this gets to the floor, can you know, kind of raise their input of what this may be concerned within their ward or how they say with the city. But I do think it, you know, after committee getting to the floor, having those conversations, I do think it may need a pause so that we don't run into just residents and alders not really knowing all of these components. I think there's a lot of questions out there, but I do think it is worth a conversation for the full board to have.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. I kind of made my closing statement before by answering Alderman Ryan, but you know, to bring it back about salaries, could this money be used to hire more refuse drivers? It could, but we have money to hire more refuse drivers. We just don't have any takers for those positions, and maybe creating a government where it's inviting to come to work, to where you know you have someone who is capable of putting people in positions to be your boss, to make a welcome work environment. What I think now is people might come in and it seems, in talking to department heads and talking to people who were department heads who are no longer with the city, the change of culture that is going on currently in our you know, as aldermen, we know currently we can't get things done because there are not people to do it. There is a reason for that besides COVID. We have raised some salaries, but we have people who maybe are not controlling their departments correctly. And that is, and the one we're failing at is at trash and basic city services. And I think that we need, and I would feel more comfortable in my old age watching you guys next year, if we could be working on someone who is going to be there year after year after year, no matter what the administration is, to make the city function, because we are not functioning at all in the proper way. And with that, I will go back to Alderman Velasquez for you to close.
Thank you. I feel like you should be my closer every time, Chairman Vollmer. No, I mean, I know this is a big change, and I do want to remind everybody it's also not a big change that is happening anytime soon. And what I think this does is it continues the conversation. And thank you, Alderman Vollmer, for hitting it on the head. This is, I think, a conversation we need to keep having. Alderman Aldrich, you said, you know, there is education required. Conversation helps do that. I already told you I'm happy to do a tour of the 14th Ward. Sign me up. Let's go. We'll bring back our charter tour. So, you know, I think the people in our city deserve to have this conversation. I think they deserve I frankly think they deserve to vote on it. I know that the bill, it is a very highly technical bill, and I think you all know me and know that I like to dig in the details, and it's imperative to get it right. And I will keep working on that. I had some great recommendations and some suggestions today, but I think it's important that in this moment, that we keep this conversation going. And that is why I'd ask for a due pass recommendation of Board Bill 162, Committee Substitute 2 today.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Velasquez. And before we proceed, Aura, please add me as a co-sponsor to this bill, will you please?
Noted.
All right.
Last bill, your co-sponsor, Chairman.
Well, I couldn't resist.
Do we have public comment? I don't know if we have public comment.
That was my next one. I'll take it. It's still my meeting. Thank you. All right. Before we go on, do we have anyone signed up from the public to speak, Aura?
I have one person, David Stokes, I believe.
Okay. Are they with us? I don't see Stokes on my screen.
He should be.
Okay. I see him. Mr. Stokes, if you will please show us your face and unmute. All right, raise your right hand. Repeat for me that you swear the testimony you're going to give is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right. What you do is state your name, where you live, and we'll give you, since you're the only speaker, we'll give you a whole 5 minutes. Usually it's 3. Go ahead.
I probably won't need 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Stokes. I'm the Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute. I live in University City, but the Show Me Institute's offices are in the city of St. Louis in the Central West End. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I submitted testimony electronically, and I was told that my testimony was submitted to members of the committee. I trust that it was. It's not my intention to repeat that written testimony here. I know you're all working very hard on this topic, and I trust that you'll dive in there. I think this is a very interesting debate. I think it's a change well worth considering. I would consider myself somewhat supportive of this change here, and as I think the testimony I submitted indicates, there's arguments in favor of it, and there's arguments. There's still a lot to be decided about how city manager or city administrator, I guess we're now calling it a city manager, forms succeed. There's not much of an automatic downside, and what I mean by that is there's very little evidence that things get worse under city administrator, city manager systems, but there's just a lot of the academic research shows that some things get better. And the gentleman, Mr. Grant from the ICMA, I very much enjoyed his presentation at the prior meeting. Thought it was an talk. Enjoyed much of it. Quibbled a few of it and had a few contentions, but mostly I'm just delighted to hear that this is not being rushed on the April ballot. And I say that not as an opponent of it, but as somebody who does agree, and several of the aldermen were just speaking about the importance of sort of a long-term debate strategy, getting out and speaking in the media and community groups as this major change gets some time for the voters of the city to consider. And I think that's an excellent change that is going to have time for that debate to be had. Look, we know, as Mr. Grant laid out in his presentation, that city manager cities do have less corruption. They do have better overall fiscal management. They have less partisanship. These are all positive changes. These are all positive things. We also know that there's a lot of things that are not for sure. And I think sometimes city manager or city administrator supporters sort of claim that quality of services get better, and they might, but the evidence isn't quite as strong as that they do. They don't get worse. I'm not saying that the evidence that they get worse, but that's a difficult thing to measure. And so did Kansas City do a better job of preparing for the snowstorm that we all suffered through, and that we had trouble getting to work in the Central West End because of the ice and snow on the roads? Did Kansas City do a better job of that because they had a city manager, or just because they did a better job of it in the same way that prior St. Louis administrations did a better job on prior snowstorms? I don't know. These are very good questions to have, and a very good debate to have. And again, it's not my intention to take the entire 5 minutes to just reread my testimony, and I hope that you all go through that carefully. I do really have one major suggestion to it. And as I go through the bill, but I have not reviewed the substitute bill, so I don't believe this is in there, but correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of cities with a city manager or city administrator have a rule in there preventing elected officials from contacting city employees. And I would really stress that rule in the city should not be too strongly worded. What I mean by that is that, yes, the elected official should not be able to call up an employee in the street department and order them to do X or order them to do Y. And rules against interfering or ordering around in city employees are appropriate and common, but it can go too far. Many cities that have city managers in the St. Louis region have a rule against almost any type of contact with a city employee, and I think that's dangerous. We saw, and this isn't coming out of nowhere, we saw in Ellisville a little over a decade ago where opponents of the mayor impeached him and removed him from office simply because they saw him speaking with a city employee that wasn't the city manager. And now they were looking for a trick to get him out of office, and they succeeded in doing that. Now, he was reinstated by a judge because the actions were so beyond the pale, but I just would hope that the elected city officials would still have a right to reach out and contact city employees other than the city manager where appropriate and within reason, because you don't want elected officials to be shut out from that process and not be able to get information if they're not getting it from the city manager. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I saw you gave me the sign, and I appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity to speak.
No worries, no worries. You got all 5 minutes of it. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Okay, or do we have any other folks signed up to speak?
We do not.
All right. Do we have any written testimony besides what Mr. Stokes has claimed? I believe I saw his already.
I didn't see anything else.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to, you've already done your closing statement, Alderwoman, pardon me. We will go to, I will entertain a motion for a due pass recommendation of Board Bill 162.
Is it Board Bill 162 committee substitute or one?
Sorry, it's,
Make a motion, we pass Board Bill 162 committee substitute with a due pass recommendation.
am I allowed to second? I forget.
Can I second? Second.
There you go. Laura, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
No.
Alderman Narayan,
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Velazquez,
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich,
Aye.
Chair Palmer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 3 aye votes, 2 noes.
All right, with that, we have passed out Board Bill 162 committee substitute to the full board for further consideration. With that, do we have any announcements? Any folks have anything to announce? All right, we'll excuse Alderwoman Clark Hubbard for necessary absent. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Previous roll.
I need a second first.
Second.
All right,
So is that 14? Second, who did the previous roll?
Object to previous roll.
the previous roll. With that, we will have to take a roll call.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez,
Aye.
Alderman Aldrich,
Pass.
Chair Varmer. Chair Varmer. I can't hear you, Chair Varmer.
Aye. Nothing's changed. I'm still on.
Alderman Aldrich,
Okay.
No.
we have 4 aye votes and 1 no.
All right, 4 ayes and 1 no, a very ugly Miss Potato Head. With that, we've adjourned the meeting. Thank you very much.